detailed demand. So controller advice response entity 404. Hello everyone, very warm welcome to Think Constructive. I am Isha. In this session, I will be discussing exception handling for REST API Spring Boot project. This will be a detailed discussion for custom exception handling for REST API Spring Boot project. So if you are planning to start working with REST API Spring Boot or you are already working on REST API Spring Boot project, this session is going to be extremely useful for you because here you will learn how to do custom exception handling for any Spring Boot project. Okay, in this session, I will start with the quick discussion of exception handling, and that will be followed by the detailed demonstration of custom exception handling. All right, so let us start with the discussion now. So what do we understand from the term exception handling? Exception handling is to handle any exceptions or any errors which occurs in our application. So whatever application we are building, exceptions has to be handled in that application properly. So exception handling is a must-have feature for building any application, even if you are building a small application or you are building a large application. So goes with REST APIs. So when we talk about APIs, any good API must have exceptions handled properly so that it can give a proper response back to the client whenever that particular APIs are called by the client. And if there is any problem occurs in that API call due to any reason, API should return a proper response back to the client so that client is well informed that there is some error or some problem has occurred. Responses should not be misleading or abrupt. All right, so these are the two main annotations we will be using in today's demonstration. These will help us to do the custom exception handling in our Spring Boot REST API project. Okay, so first one is the controller advice. So controller advice annotation is used to globally handle all the exceptions. All right, so it applies globally to all the controllers, and wherever any exception occurs, this controller advice will be able to handle it. So this is one annotation we'll be using. Another annotation is exception handler. Exception handler annotation handles specific exceptions and send custom responses back to the client. That means a proper response, whichever we want to write and whichever we think that client should be able to understand why that problem has occurred, those custom responses will be coded with the help of exception handler annotation. All right, let's switch to the demonstration and we will see how we can do the custom exception handling in our REST API Spring Boot project. Okay, here is the IntelliJ IDEA editor. You can use any Java editor of your choice. All right, so I have opened my REST demo application which we have built in our previous sessions. So I'll just give you a quick recap of whatever we have built till now. And I would highly recommend you to watch the previous two sessions so that you can connect and understand fully everything. And going forward, I will be including more stuffs in this application in my subsequent sessions. Please follow along all the sessions of Spring Boot. These sessions are going to be extremely helpful for you. All right. So what we have built in our previous sessions, we have built our controller layer for a Spring Boot REST API project. So here is the controller package, and in this you can see Cloud Vendor controller is already created. In this, what we have done, we have created our get request, get by vendor ID, then get all Cloud Vendor details, followed by creating Cloud Vendor details, updating Cloud Vendor details, and finally deletion of Cloud Vendor detail by ID. Here is a Cloud Vendor model with 4 properties: vendor ID, vendor name, vendor address, and vendor phone number. Okay, these are the 4 properties of Cloud Vendor class, and in the database the table name Cloud Vendor info will be created, will be having these 4 properties. Okay, so data will be saved in Cloud Vendor info table, which is created in our MySQL database. Then we have repository layer. Repository layer is responsible to interact with the database with the help of JPA repository. In this Cloud Vendor repository is extending JPA repository. All right, which is having Cloud Vendor entity and the ID field as a string. So this JPA repository is responsible to interact with MySQL database for saving data of Cloud Vendor and retrieving data of Cloud Vendor. Okay, then we have service layer, which is having one Cloud Vendor service interface. In this Cloud Vendor service interface, we have declared 5 methods for creating, updating, deleting, fetching, and fetch all Cloud Vendor details. Okay, and then further we have service impl layer, that is implementation of this service interface, that is Cloud Vendor service impl. In this we have implemented all these 5 methods which we have declared in this service interface. All right, so you can see Cloud Vendor service impl is extending Cloud Vendor service. Okay, so all 5 methods are implemented here. Fine. And then we have a quick look at our application.yml file. In this file, we have done the configuration related to MySQL database. Okay. So this is a quick recap of what we have built till now. I'll just quickly bring up the application and show you one scenario, and then we will proceed with the exception handling stuff. So let us now bring up the REST demo application and see what happens. So my application, you can see here in the logs, it is started. Okay. I will now open MySQL Workbench and will show you the table first, and then I will open Postman and trigger a request. Okay. So here is a MySQL Workbench. You can see Cloud Vendor schema is here. Okay. And inside tables, Cloud Vendor info table is existing. I'll just say select rows from this table. What I am getting right now, the entire table is empty, blank. Why? Because I have just now started the application. So this table is freshly created. That means this table currently doesn't have any data. Okay. So we have just now seen there is no Cloud Vendor existing in our Cloud Vendor info table. Okay. Because the table is blank as of now. So let us try to query get by ID now. So I would want to query or fetch the data for this C3 vendor. Okay, let's see what happens. Say, what I have got is timestamp, status as 500, error message as internal server error, and this is the path. Okay, and here also you can notice I am getting 500 internal server error. That means something bad has happened and my query did not work. But really, whether I am able to understand from this message what wrong has happened? No, right? What I will assume, okay, some server error has happened, but I really don't know. So how to fix this kind of problem? That means how to get a proper error message with a proper status response here, that actually what problem has happened, so that the client can understand that there is some problem has happened and that problem has to be sorted out. So unless the client will get that proper error message, the client won't be able to understand what problem has happened. So in order to give this kind of proper client friendly message and a status, we should be doing exception handling. That means I should be doing some kind of exception handling in this get by ID method, so that it can return a proper error message, proper response back to the client. Let's say in this scenario, it should have been given that requested Cloud Vendor details does not exist. The moment client sees this message, the client will be able to understand that okay, Cloud Vendor which he is looking for, which the client is looking for, does not exist. Okay, so I'm back to my REST demo application. First thing, I will terminate the application. Okay, and here we can see controller, model, repository and service packages are existing. Yeah, just one more thing. In the description box below, I have given the GitHub link. So you can take the code from there as well. Okay. Okay, so let's first create the exception class here. How will I do that? I will create exception package, and inside this I will create exception class. Okay. So in our case, I will say cloud vendor not found exception. Okay. This is what I want. So this is the exception I want to create. So first thing, I'll be creating cloud vendor not found exception. Since my project is getting synced up with Git, I will just like to add my file there. Okay. Now this exception class, first thing, should extend runtime exception. Okay. So that it can be recognized as exception class. Okay. Next thing, I'll just create constructor for this class. So I'll just say generate constructor. Which one? I would want to generate two constructors for demonstration purpose: runtime exception message string and runtime exception with message and cause. Okay. So I've created two constructors here: cloud vendor not found exception with argument as message, and another constructor is with message and cause with data type as throwable. So this is the step one. We should be creating the specific exception class which should extend runtime exception like this. Okay. Now the next step is we should create the exception class in which the entire exception details will be filled in and passed back to the client. Okay. So I will say cloud vendor exception. Okay. Again, I will add this to the GitHub. So let's start adding the properties to this class. So private final string, what message we want to pass back to client will be given here. Okay. Then next property, I would want to have private final throwable. This is for cause. Okay. The next one, HttpStatus. All right. Now let us create constructor for this. So I'll just say generate constructor with all three things. Okay. Let me just do a bit of repositioning. Okay, constructor is created for this class, and now I will generate the getters for this class. Okay. Getters for all three fields. Again, a bit of a repositionings are needed. Let me just fix it. Okay, so we have created cloud vendor exception class. Okay, these are the three properties: message, throwable, and HTTP status. Here is a constructor for this. Sorry, here is a constructor for this, and then the getters for all these three properties. All right. So this is the second step. Third step is to add the handler to handle these exceptions. So I'll be adding it here itself. So I will say cloud vendor exception handler. Okay. You can call it cloud vendor exception controller also. So both are fine, whichever name you would want to give. Okay, so I've added it to my Git repo. So you can take my Git repo code. Link is given in the description box below. All right, so now we will add a handler method in this cloud vendor exception handler. Okay, which will be handling my cloud vendor not found exception. Okay, so I'll be creating a public handler here. Okay. Public, it should be returning response entity, okay, of object type, and then I will say handle cloud vendor not found exception. All right. And this will have the argument as, I'll just shift it to next line. And this handle cloud vendor not found exception method will have cloud vendor not found exception, which we have created in our step 1. Okay. So these are the arguments. So cloud vendor not found exception is given as an argument inside handle cloud vendor not found exception method. Okay, and here the implementation for this method will go. Fine. So in this method, two important things we will be doing. We will be creating the payload which will be returned back in terms of this response entity, and that error message or that exception message will be given back to client. Okay, I'll explain you the flow. So first thing what we should be doing, we should be creating the payload here. And what is my payload? And where does my payload will go? It will go inside cloud vendor exception. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just instantiate cloud vendor exception. Okay. New cloud vendor exception, and inside this constructor, what we should be doing, we should be passing 3 things. Okay. What are the 3 things? First one is cloud vendor not found exception dot get message. That means whatever message we want to give back to the client will come here. Okay. Then if we want to return back the cause, so it will be cloud vendor not found exception dot get cause. Okay. And then last argument is HTTP status. So whichever HTTP status we think will be most suitable, we should be returning that back. So HTTP status, let's say not found, I want to give. Okay. What we have done, we have created a payload of cloud vendor exception, which should finally be returned back with the help of response entity. So next thing will be, what we'll be doing, we will be returning new response entity. Okay. And inside this, what we'll be doing, it will have 2 arguments. The first one is the payload, which we have just now created, cloud vendor exception, and the next one is HTTP status. Let's say here also I want to say not found, because finally the issue is, the error is cloud vendor is not found. So the same HTTP status we should be returning. Okay, I am giving it here at 2 places. I'll show you where these 2 things will be displayed back to the client. All right. So we have created cloud vendor exception handler, in which we have one method called handle cloud vendor not found exception. Okay. And we have implemented this method like this. All right. So the next thing is, what we should be doing, we should be telling this method which all exception it's going to handle. Okay. So how do we do that? We will put the annotation. Let me just give a line here. Yeah. How do we do that? We will put an annotation, exception handler annotation. Okay. And this exception handler will have a value as the list of exceptions which will be handled by this method. Okay. So in our case, we are handling only one exception here. So I'll be giving cloud vendor not found exception dot class. Suppose I want this method to handle in the same way one more exception. So with the comma, I can give that one more exception class here also. Okay. For now, this is sufficient. So what will happen? This cloud vendor not found exception will be mapped with this method argument, handle cloud vendor not found exception, and the remaining things will take place like this. Okay. I hope this part is very clear. One more thing we should be doing in this handler, we should annotate cloud vendor exception handler class with controller advice. Why are we putting this controller advice here? Because this controller advice is responsible to handle exceptions, rather multiple exceptions globally throughout this project. Okay. So whatever exceptions we want, we can keep writing the handler methods inside this, create a mapping with the help of exception handlers like this, and all will be intercepted or handled by this controller advice. Okay. So that is a step number 3. Now the next step is we need to see from where we can throw these exceptions and how will they behave. Okay. So what we'll do in this service package, because the service implementation is responsible to handle all the business logic. Okay. So what we'll be doing, we'll go inside our get cloud vendor method, because get by ID we have seen we were doing, and what were we getting? We were getting here some internal error. Okay. So we want to show a better message here. We'll see where should we put that logic. Whatever business logic we are doing in our Spring Boot REST API project, that should go in our service layer. Okay. So in this service layer, what we have done currently, we have just directly returned find by id dot get. Okay. What this find by id is doing, it is fetching the details from the database for this cloud vendor id, and whatever response it is getting, it is giving back here. Okay. So now in this response, what we are doing, we are just saying get, so that we can extract the cloud vendor object specifically and can return it back. Fine. But what happens when it doesn't find any cloud vendor result or any record back? This get will throw the exception and we get the generic internal server error message. Okay. So what we should be doing, we will be putting our exception handling thing here. That means I'm just going to put a check from this call if I'm getting nothing. That means if this call is empty. Okay. What will I do? So if I'm getting nothing from this call, that means it is empty. I should be throwing the exception from here itself. Which exception? Throw new. Which exception we have created? We have created cloud vendor not found exception. Okay. And in this exception, I should be giving a user friendly message. That is very important. Okay. So I'll be giving, let's say, requested cloud vendor does not exist. Okay. And terminated with semicolon. So what will happen now? The moment this query will happen and it will find it is empty, that means nothing is getting returned from here. It will immediately throw new cloud vendor exception, and actually the user will get to see this requested cloud vendor does not exist, a proper error message. And with this, the client will know, okay, the cloud vendor which I am querying doesn't exist in the database. Fine. And let's say if it exists, it will simply return a graceful cloud vendor details back to the client. All right. Got it? So these many changes we should be doing. Now let us start our application. So my application is up. I have got the started REST demo application message. Okay. And now let us go back to Postman and see what happens. So here is the Postman, the same get query C3. Earlier we have got a status as 400 and error message as internal server error. Now when I will query, let's see what we get. Good thing, yeah. We have got the message as requested cloud vendor does not exist. My HTTP status as not found. And here also you can see 404 not found. A proper error message with a proper error response the client has received. All right. So this is how you should be doing exception handling with your Spring Boot REST API application. Okay. So I hope this session is clear. And now you will be able to do a proper custom exception handling in your REST API Spring Boot project. If you have any doubts, please ask your doubts in the comment section below. I will try to get back to you, to reply to you, to solve your doubts as soon as possible. Let's have a quick recap of what we have covered in today's session. So we started with our Cloud Vendor REST API Spring Boot application. Okay. And in that application, we have added exception handling, the custom exception handling. So we started with by seeing the actual problem. If we don't do any exception handling, what kind of problems are there, and in order to fix those problems, to solve those problems, how should we be doing the custom exception handling in our REST API Spring Boot project. For that, what we have done, we have added this exception package. In that exception package, we followed 3 steps. So first thing, what we have done, we created Cloud Vendor Not Found Exception, followed by Cloud Vendor Exception class. And then finally, we created Cloud Vendor Exception Handler. This one. Okay. After adding all these 3 classes, what we have done, we went back to our service layer implementation, and in our service implementation class, we have put a check that if the cloud vendor does not exist, how to throw the particular exception with the specific or user-friendly response message back to the client. All right. So Spring gives us a lots and lots of features, library packages. We should know how to use them more effectively and make our applications a lot better. All right, so I hope this session helped you and actually you were able to learn custom exception handling in a proper way in REST API Spring Boot application. If you have any questions, please ask your questions in the comment section below. And also I would like to request you to annotate the particular timeline which you feel will be helpful for more and more people and you found it really beneficial. Annotate that timeline, that will be really helping all of us as a community. Thank you everyone for watching the session. I hope you found it useful. There are more sessions available on the channel, so feel free to explore them. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel and also ring the notification bell so that you are always updated with the new upcoming sessions. Also share the channel details with more and more of your friends and colleagues so that we grow together more stronger as a community. All right, stay connected with Think Constructive. See you in the next session. Bye for now.